session. Again, thank you for everyone that's turned up. Angela and Helen, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks ever so much, Rob. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Helen Meese. I am an electromechanical power engineer and a chartered member of the IMechE. I have over 20 years experience working in both academia and industry, and I am now the CEO of a medtech consultancy. I'm passionate about helping companies to deliver their innovations, and in doing so, ensuring that their technology benefits the whole of society. I'm Vice Chair of the IMechE's Biomedical Engineering Division. I'm a past trustee, and I'm also a member of the Royal Academy of Engineers Healthcare Policy Panel. So now I'll pass on to my colleague, Angela.
Thanks very much, Helen. My name's Angela Hobbs. I completed an MSc in Sustainable Business in 2009 at the University of Bath, and this really transformed the way I thought about the design of products and services, and also about the people who use them, the organisations who pay for them, and the wider impacts to society. Today, I work with tech startups in the Oxford University Incubator, which means I'm fortunate enough to see incredible innovations and disruptive technologies. I'm also aware of the importance of the people behind the ideas, making sure they have the right conversations at the right time for success, investment, development, and global sustainable impact. Today, we're talking about engineering a sustainable future and why this matters. Engineers are people who make things happen. You all know that. For me, they have the skills and knowledge to solve problems on a global scale. Sustainability, in the original definition, is to meet our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this definition came from the Brundtland Report, also called Our Common Future. It was published in 1987 by the World Commission on Environment and Development to introduce the concept of sustainable development and describe how it could be achieved by understanding the connections between social equity, economic growth, and environmental problems. 33 years later, I just ask, what have we done for future generations, and has it been at the pace and change we need? Last week, the Royal Academy of Engineering produced a webinar on engineering a sustainable world, and the webinar today is to introduce a 2-day training program that Helen and I have designed for IMechE on engineering a sustainable future. And it's so positive to see engineering organisations addressing the need for engineers to develop sustainable solutions to global challenges. These two photographs shown here side by side illustrate just two extremes of life in our world today. La Chueca in Nicaragua was the largest open dump site in Central America and received more than 4 million cubic metres of waste during its lifetime. It was home to over 250 families. Municipal authorities documented severe respiratory diseases within this population, which had an average life expectancy of 50 years. Approximately 1,000 people resided at this dump, and 50% of those people were children under the age of 18. Changes have been made here, and the dump is now closed, and in 2016, a modern landfill and a recycling plant were built, but there is still so much work to be done. 7,000 kilometres away, the second image shows Lake Louise in Canada, where inhabitants' life expectancy is around 86 years. The area has its own environmental manager and sustainability plan, which concentrates on 6 key areas: ecosystems, energy, transportation, waste, water, and air. The closure of aging dumps around the world is helping to clean the air. The drive is part of an effort by countries to cut down on pollution and stem the flood of greenhouse gases. It comes after years of lobbying by environmentalists. Closing open dump sites and moving towards sustainable waste management systems is a key to achieving clean air for all, which is the theme of the first International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies, observed on September the 7th and established by the United Nations General Assembly. I read a brilliant book recently. I strongly advise it and recommend it. It's called Choked by Beth Gardner, who lays bare the threat of air pollution, which prematurely kills 7 million people a year. It's strongly linked to strokes, heart attacks, many kinds of cancer, premature births, and dementia. But in the book, she also gives us hope as she shares inspirational stories of the people working for a healthier future. This year, more than ever, we have had actions forced upon us because of devastating consequences of COVID-19. Can we hope that some of the natural recoveries we have seen could be recognised and supported in the future? While pollution inhaled in the past is still causing harm today, the temporary experience of cleaner air brought about by widespread shutdowns may offer hope and innovative opportunities for the kind of world we want to build after the pandemic. Even temporarily cleaner air can help ease the burden on our healthcare systems. But when the pandemic finally abates, will polluting industries seek to make up for lost time with even higher production? And with recession looming, will investment in wind and solar power decline? We know that change is possible, but how do we increase the pace? Helen, for me, clearly, we need engineers at the core of this change. So from your perspective, do you think that engineers are given the right opportunities to be involved in those critical early conversations that enable them to apply their skills and knowledge to engineer a sustainable future?
Well, I suppose as a good chartered engineer, I should start with what is expected of me by my institution and my governing body. Within the IMechE, we have bylaws and documents which state clearly that as engineers, we must do no harm by not compromising the welfare, health and safety of society, by upholding a professional reputation to safeguard the public interest, and by listening to the concerns and needs of society. But engineers have always faced the conflict between upholding these principles and the requirements and restrictions placed on them by the businesses that they work for, particularly in terms of budget, materials, design, etc. Now, if you haven't already identified the location on the slide, it's a photograph of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor, the site of the worst man-made disaster of the 20th century. The term sustainability wasn't really on the lips of many of the engineers at that time, and the long-term consequences of nuclear disaster were considered extremely small versus the economic benefit, particularly to the Soviet Union. Yet, nearly 35 years on, the repercussions of poor decision-making are still being felt locally, nationally, and globally. Now, back in 2009, the Engineering Council produced a guidance on sustainability for engineers, and they acknowledged this dichotomy of needs versus limitations, which engineers continue to struggle with today. I think, however, that the leadership and influencing role of engineers in achieving sustainability should not be underestimated. Increasingly, they are part of multidisciplinary teams that include non-engineers working across sectoral and even international boundaries, and they are becoming much more vocal on the need to safeguard the environment and society over financial and economic gain. Now, the building you can see at the front of that picture is the new sarcophagus, and it's now completed and in situ over the crumbling reactor. This was, at the time of its construction, the largest engineering project in the world, weighing 35,000 tonnes, taller than the Statue of Liberty and bigger than Wembley Stadium. This structure is designed to enclose this contaminated site for the next 100 years at a cost of $1.6 billion. The sustainability of this facility is now key to this vast and long-term project of dismantling and clearing the site. Now, we will not see it in our lifetime. I certainly won't. Yet embedded in the vision of the company managing this site is to reduce harm and redress the situation by creating a positive impact on the environment. Now, I believe this quote from the ERA Foundation is an apt one. The solution to every major issue facing our planet and population will require the involvement of engineers. Several generations of engineers will drive the mission and shape Chernobyl's future. But this can also be said of engineers in my own sector of healthcare engineering, where for too long they have not had a voice in determining the direction of healthcare. And it has taken a global pandemic for senior managers within the NHS to recognise the value of engineers and engage them early in the process to address this life or death challenge. In healthcare, Cost saving is paramount over any concern about sustainable practices. But with demand for PPE and medical equipment, the issue of sustainable management of things like one-use devices and the disposal of contaminated materials has led to engineers' professional insight being highly prized. So I would say that we are on the cusp of some great changes.
Thanks, Helen. And on that positive note of change, today in this conversation, we want to highlight new collaborations, some of the ones that Helen and I have been following over the course of the last 12 months. We want to talk about partnerships and about the people and companies that are driving change and putting engineers at the forefront of sustainable actions. In 2019, the UNESCO Executive Board declared the 4th of March as World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development and launched a competition to advance the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This year, 400 young engineers from over 70 countries showcased their projects. Ada Rafa from Imperial College was the overall winner. Her winning entry was for her work on dye recycle, the process she developed to address textile waste in the fashion industry. Her work contributes to achieving Sustainable Development Goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production, by addressing the issue of overproduction and overconsumption in the textile industry. Her winning entry also contributes to Goal 13, climate action, by diverting textile waste from landfill and incineration while providing a more sustainable dyeing technology alternative. The Sustainable Development Goals take an integrated approach to future development, combining progress in economic prosperity, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. The World Federation of Engineering Organizations, founded in 1986, represents nearly 100 nations and 30 million engineers and recognizes the importance of engineering in achieving these goals and is committed to playing a key role in leading and coordinating projects to achieve them through engineering. WFEO can bring together its members, educational institutions, government and industry to address the need to develop sustainable frameworks and best practices for the implementation of engineering solutions for sustainable development. In the declaration by UNESCO, a statement read, "Engineering is the foundation of our society. It propels us from our first use of tools to our first journey into space, and it will be fundamental in solving future global and potentially interstellar challenges. However, despite how much we rely on engineering, we rarely consider the work that engineers perform behind the scenes." Helen, is it possible to take these type of initiatives to a wider audience, to those decision makers in organizations, the authority to create a changing focus? What needs to happen from your point of view as an engineer?
Well, that's a great question, Angela, and an issue that I, and I'm sure many of those listening today, will have faced on a daily basis. Affecting change within your business, especially at the C-suite level, can be an uphill battle for many engineers. Engineering has always been a fairly conservative industry from that point of view, but there are some organisations that are not just thinking about profits, but are embedding sustainable goals in their business strategies. Perhaps I could give an example here. The solar panel manufacturer SunPower in the US are leading the way in sustainable approaches and even going beyond what most companies would consider their obligation to wider society. They have recognised the value of including sustainable development goals in their long-term business plan, and it is definitely paying off. Now, interestingly, Thomas Werner, who is the CEO, is not someone from the business or finance sector, but he's actually an engineer. He is not solely focused on the profit-making aspect of the business. Of course, that is his role, but he sees the broader implications of engineering, engaging with the global community in his company's growth. Werner has encouraged his team to think beyond the usual STEM outreach programs and has created a solar science academy, which engages college students to think about renewable energy career opportunities. In doing so, Werner and his company have created a workforce pipeline of future engineers and scientists, already committed to sustainable principles. Now, the business has also partnered with We Care Solar in a hands-on program for young people that gives them a chance to learn and link science and technology with international philanthropy. The high school students develop awareness of energy poverty in the developing world by building a 200-watt solar suitcase, which is what you can see in the photograph. And these are donated to non-profit groups working with schools and orphanages in regions that lack access to reliable electricity supplies. Now, these kind of initiatives have the power to place organisations at the forefront of sustainable change. And I believe engineers have the foresight to create viable programmes such as this, which don't affect the bottom line of the business, but can have wide-reaching effects on society. I think that those in senior positions in industry, perhaps listening today, have an opportunity to reflect on their business vision and objectives to ensure that they are not just paying lip service to sustainability, but are considering the long-term business benefits of such an approach. Now, this is something that we will discuss in our training program in February, where participants will gain an insight into how other organisations align engineering sustainable practices with their business objectives and how they can develop similar processes themselves.
Thanks, Helen. And on this slide here, I really want to focus on one example of engineering excellence in a prototype and now a product. And for positive impact, this is one really worth noting. This was designed by Ocean Cleanup. CEO and founder of Boyan Slat is an engineer and winner of the Sustainable Entrepreneurship Award. His non-profit organisation are developing advanced technologies to rid the oceans of plastics. Their work they're doing is a wonderful illustration of how engineers can design and build a sustainable future. Ocean Cleanup aim not only to clean up what is already out there, but to stop new plastic from entering the ocean, to close the tap. Working together with government leaders, individuals and private corporations, their goal is to tackle the 1,000 most polluting rivers all over the world in 5 years from rollout. Their product, the Interceptor, is the ocean cleanup's answer for river plastic waste. It's the first scalable solution to prevent plastic from entering the world's oceans from rivers. It's 100% solar powered, extracts plastic autonomously, and is capable of operating in the majority of the world's most polluting rivers. Plastic in our oceans, as we're all aware, causes devastation to birds and fish and wildlife, and plastic debris, which carries new waves of invasive species with further devastating consequences. Based on an economic assessment model developed by Deloitte in the Netherlands, plastic waste in rivers and oceans led to costs between $6 and $19 billion to key economic sectors for 87 coastal countries last year. The study makes a compelling argument for local governments, companies and NGOs to take decisive action and prevent further pollution. If not, the costs will continue to climb in the coming years. Their report is called The Price Tag of Plastic Pollution, and it shows the costs emerging and presents a conclusive case for the need for change. Ocean Cleanup are seeking partners, funders and sponsors to make their river cleanups possible and accelerate the deployment of more interceptors around the world. Boyan Slat was clearly a very active sustainability champion at a very early stage in his education and career. And with his team, they've achieved incredible results. And I want to hand over to you, Helen, and say, we can see that increasingly universities around the world are recognizing the need for young engineers to be fully grounded in their education in sustainable practices. How beneficial do you believe these courses will be? And what do you think the impact they will have in the future? And is it enough?
Well, the idea of sustainability is no longer just an add-on to an engineering degree course, certainly like it was back in my university days. Universities have recognised the demand for specialist engineers in this field, and there are a number of examples of degree courses covering sustainable energy, like the example in the slide here from Queen Mary University in London. But there are well over 100 undergraduates and about 10 postgraduate courses in sustainability, covering everything from food and agriculture to energy and building services and even fashion and tourism. Of course, the IMechE has been engaged in the accreditation of sustainable engineering courses for many years and accredits about 30, I believe. And its members have been actively driving change across the engineering sector through the Energy, Environment and Sustainability Group, the EESG, which is working towards the transition to a sustainable future. And I should also point out that you are also able to apply to become a chartered environmentalist through the institution as well. But going back to your question about the universities, as an engineer, you already have the ability to think critically, work within a diverse team and communicate effectively. And this is exactly what future global business leaders will need in order to help solve the challenges facing modern society. So how much would a sustainable qualification really have in terms of impact on real world problems? Data does show that these degrees can serve as a beneficial career stepping stone, not to mention providing a competitive advantage for the business that you work in. Organisations are increasingly seeking employees who are sustainability literate across all job roles. I would certainly encourage engineers to consider expanding their knowledge and their CPD through a sustainable engineering degree. A degree will not only equip you with the ways to address global changes, but it will also help you to develop specialist skills that are both strategic and adaptive. And for those of you like me who didn't study sustainability per se as part of their degree, but are looking to have greater impact in your organisations. Again, coming back to our course in February, we're going to provide you with a selection of tools to enable you to make a stronger case for sustainability within your business. And I'm very excited to talk to people about that.
Yes, me too, Helen. I'm really looking forward to it. Another one of my favourite examples of sustainability in engineering is PaveGen, the company that developed a system that harnesses the kinetic energy of people walking across paving slabs and converts it into electricity. I first heard of this company when they installed 176 tiles along the Champs-Élysées on the final stretch of the Paris Marathon back in 2013. Runners competed against each other on the final sprint to generate the most energy. The energy they created was displayed on a large screen and powered LED signage beside the race in real time. The event and the company received worldwide coverage. Trevor Clawson, who's an author, tech and startup journalist, in an article for Forbes, described how the company was founded in 2009 by Lawrence Kemble Cook, an engineer with an energy industry background. In the article, he asked, is this the kind of technology that could make a perhaps small but significant contribution to meeting energy needs? And what role will kinetic energy play in helping to create the low or no carbon future? In the great scheme of things, it may be that it will only represent a small part of a very big mix of alternative sources. But this technology can provide a cost-effective means to power systems. Against the £950,000 target, PaveGen raised $1.1 million, which has now risen to $2.6 million, to enable them to continue their development and outstanding work. The paving can be installed at around the same price as high-end conventional slabs, and once the equipment's in place, site operators can reduce electricity costs and benefit from useful data feeds. And the bigger the scale, the bigger the contribution. My experience is in helping and supporting tech startups, helping them align their innovations to business models and routes to market to achieve funding and enable them to develop their solutions. But even successful startups like PaveGen can struggle in those really early stages to get the funding and support they need. And in a highly competitive environment, it's not always just about the innovation. It's also about the market, the timing, and the team. Helen, from an engineering perspective, and here comes another one of my challenging questions, what advice would you share with entrepreneurial engineers looking to tackle today's global sustainability issues?
Well, it is a tough question and not one that's simple to answer, I suppose. I guess I would encourage any startup or innovator to be passionately relentless when it comes to sustainability issues. But that aside, just in the last week, the UK government has released funding to support entrepreneurs and startups in scaling up their eco-friendly innovations. This is very exciting because more than 1,000 of the UK's greenest businesses will get a share of £134 million in government funding. Businesses and ideas receiving funding could completely transform other areas of industry, including manufacturing, hospitality, and transport. And one exciting business that really caught my eye, who are getting funding, is Scottish biorefinery firm Oceanum. They are developing technology to turn seaweed into food and compostable packaging products in order to reduce plastic waste. But for the most part, the really disruptive organisations are just doing things for themselves. And one such business is BrewDog. I know they're a very controversial company at the moment, but one worth mentioning. They have never relented in their attitude towards sustainability, and right from the start in 2007. But even now, they don't believe that they're doing enough. They took the decision to be completely solar powered by renewables several years ago, including all of their bars. Future plans include installing a biomethane plant on the brewery site to produce biofuels, and they are working with Arrival, who, Angela, I know you're going to talk about Arrival later on, to ensure that there will be a fleet of EV trucks in the near future for BrewDog to use. And over the next 24 months, they intend to become completely carbon neutral by building an anaerobic digester on the site as well. Now, such business decisions cannot be taken lightly, of course. There are significant financial costs and risks associated with this kind of approach, but many of their decisions have been technical in nature, and there are some excellent lessons for the engineering community to learn from BrewDog themselves. So my recommendation to any aspiring innovator or disruptor, either building their own startup or already within an existing business, don't be afraid of approaching management with your ideas of how you can assist them in becoming more sustainable. You may find that the role you need to take on doesn't actually exist yet, in which case it may be time to create a sustainable business case, but persevere.
Thanks, Helen. As we discussed at the beginning of the webinar, sustainability today addresses economic growth, environmental challenges, and social equity. And if I was giving an award for this, it would be to Bristol-based Open Bionics, who to me are inspirational in radically improving the lives of children and adults. Joel Gibbard, who studied robotics engineering and business, co-founded Open Bionics in 2014 with Samantha Payne, who's also chairwoman of the WECA Creative Fund. The Open Bionics co-founders were named as the 2018 Hottest Startup Founders in Europe at the Europia Awards. And in 2017, they picked up the $1 million UAE AI and Robotics International Award for Good, which gave them the momentum to complete development of the Hero Arm shown here. With the help of an awesome team and the support of the Limb Different community, they're pioneering a new bionic age inspired by science fiction. Hero Arm is the world's first clinically approved 3D printed bionic arm with multi-grip functionality and empowering aesthetics. Engineered and manufactured in Bristol, the Hero Arm is a lightweight and affordable myoelectric prosthesis for below elbow amputee adults and children aged 8 and above. Their strapline is "Your limb difference is your superpower." I remember a few years ago seeing Joel and his partner presenting at the Wellcome Foundation for funding and having an absolutely incredible reception to their outstanding work. And they've just continued to grow and go from strength to strength. They absolutely demonstrate the importance of collaboration and forward thinking. And today they're working with many organisations, including NHS England, the Bristol Centre for Enablement, Bath University and Gyrobot. So today in this conversation, we've highlighted the value of collaborations and partnerships, encouraging innovation in sustainable solutions with universities, and the need for business skills to help engineers develop ideas and get them to the forefront and where we need them. Another valuable business asset, which we will address in our course, is accreditation and support from external organisations. One of those, which some of you may be familiar with, is Cradle to Cradle. Cradle to Cradle Certified is a globally recognised measure of safer, more sustainable products made for the circular economy. To receive certification, products are assessed for environmental and social performance across 5 critical sustainability categories: material health, material reuse, renewable energy and carbon management, water stewardship and social fairness. Helen is going to discuss this in more detail later on. Another example for external accreditation is Certified B Corp. Certified B corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. B Corp are accelerating a global cultural shift to redefine success in business and build a more inclusive and sustainable economy. They don't just evaluate a product or service, they assess the overall positive impact of the company that stands behind it. And increasingly, that's what people care most about. It's also an incredibly valuable asset in the war for talent. Do take a look at the directory of B Corp companies on their website, and you'll see the scale and impact this organisation is having on sustainable business. Helen, as an engineer, which organisations really inspire you, and how can engineering companies embrace the changing business environment today?
Well, I find it really hard to pick out individual inspirational examples. I mean, we've mentioned quite a few here, but as someone who has spent a great deal of my working time in technical assurance, I'm slightly obsessed with processes and procedures, it has to be said. So for me, the inspiration comes from seeing companies take progressive steps towards sustainability through the application of established methodologies like Cradle to Cradle, as you've mentioned, Angela. We will be delving into C2C approaches during the training course, along with a number of other tools to develop sustainable processes. So I won't go into too much detail here. Inspirational organisations are those that epitomise the C2C ethos by considering how the materials in their products might be reutilised or recycled. Now, such processes can be extremely difficult to implement. You can take my Chernobyl example at the beginning as an extreme example of that. But more straightforward examples would be that of, say, the Tesla EV batteries, where rather than stripping out the battery materials after they're no longer viable for car use, the units are being repurposed for domestic use as energy storage systems, and thus extending the usable life of the battery. Now, William McDonough, who was one of the co-authors of the C2C book, said that there is no such thing as waste. This, I believe, should be the mantra for all engineers. His quote sits equally alongside his co-author, Michael Brungart, where he said in his quote, and I often use this with some of my clients: imagine what a world of prosperity and health would look like, and then begin designing for it right now. So I think for me, those organisations that really inspire me are those that ensure that they are designing for a prosperous future, but who are also considering the pathways that resources will take both before and after their product leaves the factory.
Thanks, Helen. And also, one of the things that we haven't yet spoken about, but of course is a huge impact and consideration, is EV and transport. World EV Day was created this year by sustainability media agency Green TV in partnership with tech company ABB. Aid Thomas, who founded Green TV, said, "The rapid transition to electrified, sustainable mobility has never been more urgent." So my final example of disruptive innovation is the fast-paced and successful company Arrival, who are accelerating autonomous and electrical vehicle technology by fusing AI with new forms of automotive engineering. They're working already with some of the world's leading businesses and governments with the goal to redefine how our cities look, think, and feel. Their vehicles will be 100% built by robots and are autonomous ready. They're already recognized by LinkedIn as one of their top startups of 2019, the top 25 hottest UK companies to work for, as well as being one of the world's newest unicorns with a $3 billion valuation. Arrival also supply the components to the first fully electric and driverless race car and racing series, RoboRace. One of the other fascinating things that Arrival has focused on from the very beginning is the issue of attracting talented engineers. And you'll see from this quote here on the slide that their campaigns boldly state what they want to see in applicants. They want their design engineers to have the ability to question everything. They also want the understanding that how something was achieved last year means it may now be outdated, and that their belief is innovation is constant. Do not hold on to legacy thinking. Overall, they want their engineers to have the ability to make decisions, which I find really positive and promising for future organizations to put engineers in that role and give them the right impact at the right time. So Helen, my final difficult and awkward question of today is, how would you describe fundamental and commonly accepted engineering principles which are connected to sustainability as a key benefit in attracting talented people into engineering?
Well, I find in my line of work that there are actually few, if any, of my clients who've considered the UN Sustainable Development Goals or even read the NHS Sustainable Development Strategy for Health and Social Care Systems, certainly in the context of their innovations. As engineers, we all know how costly it can be to rebuild or redesign products if mistakes are found too late in the manufacturing process. I'm sure you're all nodding profusely. With this in mind, sustainable engineering principles really should be contemplated and applied well before any thought of the design is undertaken. So to the engineers listening today, regardless of industry sector or years of experience, seek out, read and apply the principles laid out by your own certifying body, the Engineering Council. Now, these cover 6 principles, but the ones that stand out for me are: contribute to building a sustainable society present and future, apply professional and responsible judgment, do more than just apply legislation and codes, and manage risk to minimise adverse impact to people or the environment. When these principles are applied and lived by, great things can be achieved. Like the building of Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, which is in the picture here, it's one of the world's most sustainable urban communities, and it combines passive and intelligent design. Oh, we seem to have lost our slide there. Passive and intelligent design with and really demonstrates how urban environments can accommodate denser populations more efficiently. The water and energy demand of Masdar is 40% lower than that of the average buildings in Abu Dhabi itself, and you can see the city behind this Masdar. So I look forward to exploring these principles and other directives with the participants on our training course. And I will close by saying that as an engineer, I relish different ways of thinking and working sustainably. And I'm really privileged actually to work with Angela, particularly on this new IMechE training course, because it combines our substantial experience of sustainability and enables us to provide a fantastic mix of anecdotal evidence and pragmatic strategies to deliver really engaging training to those that participate. So I'm really looking forward to engaging with you, and hopefully you're going to join us on that course.
Thanks, Helen. I think I would just add that because you and I are from such diverse backgrounds, we are real evidence of what happens when business and engineering begin with a problem, even at a small scale, and work together to solve it. And we've had to learn how to do that. We're currently working together on an amazing project for the engineering design team at Cambridge, and our respect for each other's knowledge and appreciation of the impact we can make together has been a big part of our successful collaboration. I'll leave you with this slide and say that this picture of the beautiful Lake Louise in Canada is the one, wouldn't it be wonderful to aspire to, for more than the population that currently benefits from it. I want to say thanks very much for listening. We look forward to welcoming you on the course, and do please get in touch if you'd like to know more. I'll hand back to you, Rob.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for that. Thank you all for listening. It's an exceptional webinar there. We've got a few questions that have been coming in throughout the session. And by all means, guys, you attended, if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat box. And again, if you haven't been able to find the chat box, if you see the tab on the right-hand side of the screen with a little arrow, click on that, and you should be able to see the attendee chat and type your questions in there. So Helen and Angela, the questions sort of split into two main categories, really. First, about sort of power and energy, and then about qualifications and academia. The first one we have here is, hi, considering the Chernobyl incident, is it okay to completely get over the fear of nuclear power plants? I think it will be the lack of advancement in technology. What do you think?
Blimey, that's a tricky question. Obviously, yes. I mean, even those listening today who weren't even born when Chernobyl happened, it still looms large in the engineer's psyche, I suppose. Of course, it's always going to be there as a precedent for what can go horrendously wrong. But this is the purpose of what we do as engineers, to ensure that these things are mitigated to the point where they won't happen again, or the likelihood is so very small. And I think that's the real importance of looking at and embedding sustainability in any strategy. The majority of people now working at Chernobyl to help take it down are nearly all engineers, and the management team are nearly all engineers. And that's because they are recognised as being the people who can address these kind of mass impacts on our environment and on society. So I appreciate, yes, that there is always going to be a fear of technology such as nuclear power, but I think that's where our engineering know-how will address those sorts of concerns in the future.
Excellent, thank you for that answer. Next question, for curiosity, the questioner writes, is there any data available for the carbon footprint of every solar panel produced?
Goodness, I am absolutely not sure if it's been combined together. I'm sure there are some research. There's some research out there. Somebody has probably collated all the data that they can possibly find. But I would suspect that changes are happening so rapidly. I mean, if you look at the amount of solar power, even just if I open the windows to my house here, the number of solar panels that are now appearing on people's houses, and solar heating as well, solar water heating. I think it would be incredibly difficult to calculate the combined effort, but we have to consider that, the sun shines most days, if not in the UK when it's not raining, but certainly in parts of the world. We have an opportunity to utilize that resource which shines down on us every day. And I think we're going to see greater innovation in solar power and the way that we utilize that, and particularly in energy storage. I know that the Energy and Environment Sustainability Group have been very much focused on ways that we can expand our use of renewables, and energy storage, I think, will be one of the key areas that engineers are going to be working in the next few years.
I think, if I may, I'd just add to that and say one of the things that Helen and I do when we work together and we're planning training courses is, once we know who's registered for the course, we do ask what their particular areas of interest are, or those burning questions that they really want to address. And because between us, we have some we're fortunate to have some great connections and experts that we can collaborate with, we will make sure that we have relevant information examples to really hone in on the interest that those people on the course have. So it is something we like to do for every training course we produce. Helen, is there anything you'd add to that on how we operate and manage our training programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to be able to provide examples, good, clear examples, so that they can be used as exemplars, really, to help the engineering community develop their own ideas and their own ways of working in their company or industry. So we will draw on quite a lot of examples, and what we like to do, and it would be nice, let us know what your area of interest is in the chat, everyone, if you're listening. We'd love to know the sorts of areas you're working in and the sorts of things that you would like to learn, and that will really help us to tailor what we deliver to people.
Excellent. Thank you for great answers there. Next one is, could the PaveGen product also be used on roads, rails, etc.?
I think that is part of their planning, and I've been following them for such a long time and really looking at every development they make. And I think that's certainly something they're looking at. Despite their success and the funding they've raised, I'm sure that everyone listening today can appreciate the cost of what they need to do and the scale they need to do it at. And they're still a relatively small team, could really be accelerated with more support. But they're certainly a very forward-thinking company with great plans. If you look at their website, there's some fantastic case studies of the work they've already achieved in so many locations around the world. It's really inspiring. Great, that's a great answer. Thank you for that. The next sort of three are around the sort of education side of things. Hi, very important question here. Do you think a master's in sustainable engineering is worth it right now, or is going to pay off in the very near future, i.e. the next 5 years?
Absolutely. Yes. I think, as I said in my part of the presentation, the number of degree courses in these fields, number of postgraduate courses is growing rapidly. And in fact, the institution has accredited many of these courses, and many of the other engineering institutions accredit these courses. So they recognise the value of the content within those courses. I never had that opportunity. I'm quite old now. I never had that opportunity at university. It was renewables were just kind of coming to the fore, and it was an add-on in my final year, and so I had a taster of what was to come, but not really an opportunity to engage. And it's only in my professional life that I have learned and understood these things for myself. But now our engineers have a fantastic opportunity to add, an extra strand to their skills and knowledge, and be really at the forefront of engaging with senior management within their organizations to say, look, there's business strategy here. We have to ensure the business has a competitive edge, and I have the skills to be able to do that, and I can make sure that what we do and how we do it is as sustainable as it possibly can be. So yes, I absolutely encourage our engineers, if you're not wanting to engage in doing an MSc, there are lots of CPD related opportunities, like our training course, that will enable you to get the basics of those tools under your belt, so you've got something to hit the ground running with. Not quite sure if we've lost Rob.
So sorry, I was on mute then. Thanks for that answer.
No worries.
I was chatting away, thinking, I wonder if anyone hear me. Obviously, can't. We've got about 10 minutes left. We've got a number of questions, so we'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. Next one is, how can those of us in large and already well-established organisations that don't design and or manufacture innovative products implement sustainable practices in our work?
Well, for me, I think I'm really encouraged by the question. And yes, I do recognise the challenge. But the first thing that people can do is start getting the right people in the room to have that conversation, so as many different viewpoints as possible are represented. And then look at what's going on in the market. Look at what other organisations are doing. And even if you start with a very small policy, but just address what change can you make? What can you introduce? It doesn't mean, and I totally understand with economic pressures, with concerns about what we're trying to do to recover from this situation we're currently in, there will be impacts on sustainability initiatives. But I think the most important thing for me, certainly, and I'd be interested to hear what Helen's views are on this, is get the people in the room, have the conversation, look at what you'd like to do, and then look at where you can start and connect with some of the organisations we've talked about today to get some guidelines and help and support.
Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious when you think about sustainability for a product, but when it's sort of services and things like that, it's slightly harder, I think, to think around the ideas. But it's about having a philosophy. I think for me, it's certainly about having a philosophy and applying that philosophy. So it's not just about having practical tools, but also thinking sustainably as well. And that can take time. It's not an easy thing. We often sort of don't think in those sort of terms naturally. But I think that is really the direction that I think we should be going in, is to live this process as well as apply it.
I think it can really feel like a challenging place to start, but increasingly I'm seeing with startups that may not have already considered their position on sustainability. If they begin with, well, what does compliance look like, and then look at how much further they can go, it may not be that they can do all of that in the first year or two of trading, but it does mean they've got a clear goal in mind. And I think the same thing applies to existing companies. Don't be daunted by the fact that you can't achieve everything overnight, but look at where you are and where you'd like to be and make a plan and communicate it to your clients and customers. I always find that's a benefit. It's also a great benefit in attracting talent into your organization.
Yeah, I would agree with Angela on that. And in my mind, as I mentioned, I've worked for a number of years in technical assurance, and think about the quality improvement processes that you apply in your company, and think about how your sustainability processes would align with that. Angela mentioned about the regulatory requirements and so on. It's constantly about improvement. The C2C certification, for example, it has bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and you're constantly having to work towards the next stage. So think of it as an auditing process, if you like, an iterative methodology and a philosophy that you apply in your working environment.
Excellent. That's great answers again. We'll try and get through 2 or 3 more questions. We've got sort of 5 minutes left, and we've got several. So apologies for those who we don't quite get to the questions. But here's another one. What are the most significant changes for sustainability you foresee in the very near future? I see battery energy storage, battery powered trucks making a huge impact.
I would certainly agree with that. Oh, sorry, Helen. Sorry.
No, I was going to say you go first.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I think awareness of transportation, electric vehicles, how we move and how we live in cities is huge. And I do think, despite the terribly devastating consequences of COVID, and I would never underestimate that, on one positive note, because of that, I do think many people have started to address the way they live, the way they work, the way we use things, and also to recognize that it is possible to make change. I mean, I think one of the things that COVID showed us in appalling situation was that when we're forced to make change, we can do it very quickly. And that's led to many different people changing their habits, changing the way they travel, changing the way they work and commute. And I think if we can have the opportunity, once we've dealt with this pandemic, if we can start to think about some of the positives we could take from that and move towards a more sustainable future, then we can have a much greater impact than we originally realized and have talked about, and possibly increase that pace of change that we talked about in the webinar.
Yeah, I absolutely agree as well. But in answer to the question, I think for me, there's probably a few things. I totally agree on the electric vehicles and particularly energy storage. And I know, as I said, that there are a lot of members who are working in those sort of fields, and the institution has produced a lot of policy in those particular areas, and I definitely recommend our listeners today to follow up on some of the IMechE's policies. Because I'm really focused on healthcare, I think that for me is where we're going to see some significant changes and some of the advances in technology that are really going to help in terms of sustainability. I think certainly in the medicines and sort of pharma industries, we will see some significant developments in care and provision, particularly in developing countries. And around that, we are looking at technology that's frugal. So thinking about how that piece of technology is going to work in an extreme environment. I mentioned about the solar suitcases, which are being used to power schools in very rural areas. But it's those kind of technologies and medical devices that there's been some great developments in CPAP, in the ventilator industry, that will work in very remote areas without the need for the sorts of electricity consumption and technology that you would normally associate with them. And there's also some fantastic devices which help in premature baby care, which again are completely self-contained, and the materials that are being used are being sourced locally rather than being imported and using materials that can't be recycled or reused. So I think for me, it's got to be the healthcare industry where we're going to see some significant impact.
Thank you, Helen. One last question. I think we'll get in quickly. It sort of hopefully benefit everyone. It's as a relatively new member, wondering where I could find further resources about sustainability related within the IMechE as a whole. Well,
of course, definitely come on our course. that is the whole point of today, really, in some respects. Yeah, you will certainly, I mean, that's the whole purpose of the Learning and Development organisation at the IMechE, is to provide you with those sorts of training that you might not be able to get elsewhere. There are a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of documents and policy that's been developed by the institution over the last few years. But I would certainly consider engaging with the Energy, Environment and Sustainability Group, the EESG. They are really the special interest group within the institution who really focus on these areas. And if you go onto the IMechE website under special interest groups, you will find them there. Get in touch with them and, get active in terms of what they're doing. And that, I really think, as a young new member, that's really where you should start.
Brilliant. That brings us just past past. Thank you very much, Angela and Helen, for your time. Excellent webinar, and thank you for those delegates that attended. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it, and apologies for not getting to all the questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks for listening.